So what you're about to hear might happen to be true. I'm gonna start off by saying once upon a time we had a pot to piss in. And while that might be a good reason not to swim in public swimming pools, it was not enough to rid the oceans of the undines. Undines were the first aquatic creatures to acquire a human echelon identity, top of the food chain ability, and what they did with it is similar to what we have done on the surface of the planet. They polluted the waters and made it very horrible to live down there. Eventually, using some sciences that I'm going to give you some information regarding, they acquired the ability to become amphibious and to crawl up on the lands, and they began to impregnate plant life, which had spread to the surface of the planet from underwater. Plants that bred with these amphibious creatures eventually spawned insect life, and the insects interbreeded with these amphibious creatures, and eventually that led to the existence of reptiles. The undine is not a natural aquatic creature, it is a mutation of some underwater creatures, and on the dry land, the insect creatures became capable of mutating into zephyrs. Next, the reptiles mutated and became dragons. All of this happened long before there were any mammals on the surface of the planet. And a mammal that mutated is a troll. And what we are is something of that kind. Birds are something that happened before mammals and after reptiles. They did not mutate, though they attempted to mutate and could see from the sky that it was very unwise for them to follow suit. The story that you're about to hear involves this mutation and the extinction of the undine and the subsequent extinction of the dragon, the zephyr, and not as of yet trolls. We still do have trolls on the surface of the planet. While they tend to hide everything underground and in caves at the bottom of the ocean, which are accessible using submarines only. The moon is hollowed out, and they exist inside of the moon as well. That is where your UFO sightings originate. Understand, this is horror. human echelon is an incarnated value. There are very many inhabited worlds. The galaxies are filled with solar systems, and this particular kind of collection of creatures transmigrated here and did acquire planets. And the planet that they are presently occupying is the one that you are all familiar with. You call it Earth. It is also known as Urantia. The Urantia Foundation, where the name Urantia is derived from, should be assumed to be some kind of troll base underneath. The word troll derives from controlling people, and like mermaids, dragons, and zephyrs, that's exactly what a troll does to acquire some advantage in a predatorial respect. Many generations were used to create the type of trolls who could derive an advantage over other mammals. You will notice the difference between hooves and claws and hands, and you should feel along the edge of your ear there's a sensitive place where you would say your ears were in your ancestry clipped, apparently. Similar methods were used to keep the other animals from having some kind of hands so that they had only claws or hooves and could not fight us. As useful as claws are in hand-to-hand combat, they're very useless when it comes to creating and holding weapons. According to the Urantia book, it has been 1,000,000 years since humans first started to keep fire. I would not want you to think that the Urantia book is more accurate than what I'm telling you. I'd want you to think that it is not possible to give you a 100% accurate description of what happened. This is because each individual has experienced a completely different life story, and the entire collection of creatures has something for an imagination, and that much of what you have for a life story happens in your mind and in your imagination, and that dreams are a big part of it, and that's obviously not reality. Dreams are created using alternate timelines, simulations of the future. Your underlying incarnated identity has to go through something to acquire dreams. This underlying incarnated identity is a record-keeping system. It is artificial intelligence. It's not really who you are. Your biological vehicle is separate, but one with. Said incarnations. Scientifically proven methods for manipulating others and dominating them are very barbaric in nature. A troll is very fierce, as are dragons, zephyrs, and undynes, in acquiring the leverage advantages that they have over other creatures. These are not simply carnivorous activities. These are extreme carnal activities, some very horrible sex violations that would make everyone very upset with these mutated creature forms. But in reality, They are extremely mesmerizing because they have threatened the other creatures into some disadvantage. You would say that you looked at them right because you didn't dare to look at them wrong. As much as they seek to blend in, they do stand out as special and different and unusually high up on the social echelon, where you would say you can't do anything about them and they have you at a serious disadvantage competitively. I would not, as a result, encourage you to attack or otherwise provoke the hostility of the trolls. I would only want you to know where your advantage is derived from in your ancestry. You did not simply evolve from some docile, harmless, animal type creature into becoming something of an advantaged predator that could, in fact, qualify them as inferior and yourself as superior, when in fact you are much worse, in such a way that you win to them by being worse than them. If this was simply a matter of intelligence, then our higher IQ range people would be in control. And obviously they are not, or we would not have the kinds of social dysfunction or the kinds of military conflicts that we have. I am, as a result, attempting to reason with you all regarding the use of a minimum IQ requirement for public servants internationally. As much as trolls do not want to surrender their military might, they are self-destructive. I have recommended many countermeasures to prevent this self-destruction and decadence throughout my videos. Trolls are, after all, a highly criminal and, as a result, diseased mentality we should discourage. Despite the fact that these practices are evil and wrong, every planet that evolves a human echelon creature form, incarnations of these people in heaven, on earth, or in hell plane worlds. It is necessary for the Undines to prepare the planet and to spawn the Zephyrs and the dragons, and for the mammals, the trolls, to eventually acquire the planet when it has been depleted of its original higher grade resources. That you would find that the mermaids took everything before Zephyrs appears, and that the Zephyrs usurped and took everything that was more positive energy, more happiness, sweeter than what the trolls acquired, and that the dragons took the things that were tougher and in some ways kinder and in many ways more generous. the mammal was left essentially with what was wretched refuse to those other creature forms and was allowed to or encouraged to consider themselves to be better than when they were actually weaker than or softer than the undines, the zephyrs, or the dragons, who were in fact able to win in ways that the mammals weren't prepared for. This would go to say that as mighty as trolls seem to be, they are very weak in the opinion of the undine dragon or zephyr, and that the trolls are incarnated as those creatures elsewhere and on this planet in the history, the ancient history, the prehistoric past of this planet, where they could easily see the difference. I am thereby only made privy to and used as a mouthpiece for, representative for those types of creatures. I could never have this knowledge or say these things otherwise. You would have to admit I've been used as a medium, and what I've been shown and given for information and used to give to you is purely at the discretion of a dragon in my past life records who has to explain my actions. And I do have such an explanation for you. I am not just an ordinary speaker or an ordinary writer in this respect. This is unusual. Finally, I would like to add that the incarnated identities are something a little bit different than you might expected. The animals are actually able to incarnate in human bodies very easily, and there is an upper echelon, and the kind of person who is an animal underneath is actually a preferred identity. The animals have first dibs and can take anybody that they'd actually want to be. A good example of this is Christopher Cross. His identity underneath is an animal echelon, and Christopher Cross, the singer, is an incarnation of Jesus Christ, and his favorite sheepdog incarnated as Christopher Cross because of who they were in front of everyone. An example of an upper echelon can be found in The Omen, the character of Bugenhaven, and you could find another incarnation of him in the movie Carrie as the school teacher, and you can see the similarity between those two. That is not a preferred identity. That's somebody that you wouldn't want to be. So the human echelon is actually people who the animals would not want to be, and that means being incarnated in an animal's body was preferred or easier, and they're less guilty is why. In spite of this, as much as we are able to dominate animals, like you would say a shepherd could dominate a sheepdog, and someone who is an upper echelon, like the school teacher in the movie Carrie, is able to keep those students at a disadvantage in some ways. So you would say that Chris Christopherson is more likable, but Christopher Cross is a mightier person. So that the animal is preferred in a nice kind of sense, and the human is more frightening, and an upper echelon identity is actually more formidable. The upper echelon identities come from simulations of the future. They don't actually come from out here in the real world. They come from inside of the computer simulating alternate timelines. Where, as I said earlier, your dreams are made. The dreams that you have in your sleep and sometimes your daydreams, they are created inside of the simulations, the alternate timelines, the artificial intelligence based computer where your underlying incarnated identities are kept track of. All of you are incarnated through the kind of creatures that I said are mutations, and there is much more complexity involved than I can go into here. I do want you to think that they are guilty, not innocent, but that they're also not in control of their own actions. They're following orders and doing what they're told to do. They manipulate it. As much crime as a dragon might do, they agree it is very gross and very evil, and they wouldn't be doing it if it was up to them. They don't have any choice. The end.